Grandmothers are often depicted as the nurturing mother figures, embodying love and wisdom passed down across their generations. However, contradicting the stereotypical family dynamic, there exists figures like Grandma Nye. Beneath the veneer of her endearing title of Grandma lies a narrative of darkness. Grandma Nye's story is not one of conventional warmth. Instead, it is fraught with tales of abuse, vehicular recklessness, and certain collusions with her son. Yet amidst these shadows, Grandma Nye grappled with dementia, which would blur the boundary between innocence and culpability, along with reality and imagination. As we navigate her life, we confront uncomfortable truths and unravel Grandma Nye. This is Grandma Nye, the most depraved story you've never heard of. The most important elements of Grandma Nye's story unfold within the constraints of the 21st century, a mere snapshot of her existence that spans far beyond writing. Delving into the entirety of her past would require a narrative as expansive as the annals of human history. It is essential to note that Grandma Nye's battle with dementia wasn't lifelong. Rather, it emerged later in her life, roughly the last 10 years, as one would expect from dementia. Public records reveal fragments of her journey. She welcomed 2 children into the world during the tumultuous decades of the 1960s and 1970s. The journey of Grandma Nye's eldest child, anonymous for their safety, unfolds with their marriage and the birth of Grandma Nye's grandchild, a soul unwittingly destined to become a source of torment in her later years. Throughout, we'll discover that while Grandma Nye's eldest child could have potentially intervened to prevent the tragedies that would ensue, it would be unfair to impugn them for the actions of others. Their role in the unfolding drama is largely passive without much willing participation in the hijinks that ensue within Grandma Nye's life. However, the same cannot be said for Grandma Nye's second child. Her second child, Cocoy, went down a path marked by misfortune and fumbles, with the pinnacle of his struggles developing only in recent history. They belong to the Filipino ethnicity, and the Filipino heritage makes itself loud and clear with the name of Cocoy. There is not much I can say about the eldest child, but rest assured they have a normal name. I'll definitely give it to Grandma Nye that the name Cocoy was unique. But let's shift the focus from mere mentions of his name and delve deeper into the man behind it. Cocoy's existence is defined by hoarding, gambling addiction, and frequenting districts characterized by red lights. Family members paint a vivid picture of his living space, describing it as so cluttered that walking through it was an impossible feat. His tendency to take refuge at his siblings' home hints at a life marked by instability and transience. Cocoy's beat-up old truck, with its seats emitting a crunch upon contact, becomes emblematic of his sleazy lifestyle. It's a vehicle steeped in notoriety, christened the fuck truck due to its association with its pastimes. Through these details, we can already see each facet contributing to the man defined by his vices and the world of Grandma Nye. Through the guise of frugal living, there is actually a sizable portion of money within the family, but it was always being held onto by Grandma Nye and her eldest for savings, or it was being gambled away by Cocoy. While we all know that gamblers quit before they're about to hit it big, despite never quitting, Cocoy never made it big, and only served to waste his family's money. This is not to say that he made them broke, this is though to say that they have money, and Cocoy was not helping them stack that shit. It may seem odd that I bring up that they're not actually as poor as you would expect from how I describe them, but trust me, it all makes sense later. In 2004, a pivotal year for Grandma Nye's family, her eldest child welcomed a newborn into the world. This baby was destined to remain a constant presence throughout Grandma Nye's remaining years. He became an integral part of her large 2-story household, nestled alongside his parents. I should of course note that the home belonged to the parents, and Grandma Nye was the one living with them. Details about the early life of Grandma Nye's grandchild remain elusive, veiled in the mists of time, save for the fact that he had frequent visits to the hospital due to various health problems. While Grandma Nye was not responsible for these visits, her treatment of her grandchild while he grew up would prove to be the catalyst for animosity that would be felt between the two. Despite the veiled shroud of mystery surrounding Grandma Nye's grandchild, one fact remains certain: he's still alive, albeit off the grid, away from the prying eyes of others. His survival in itself is a testament to resilience, as an incident in his youth would prove to be the first of many incidents that would unfold. This incident I'm referring to occurred one fateful day in his youth. She found herself behind the wheel, her grandchild seated in the back on what began as an ordinary drive home from school. The details of their conversations or anything that happened prior are lost to time, but the abrupt conclusion of this drive is a major part of Grandma Nye's lore. Instead of a more common collision at an intersection, the sudden conclusion of this drive unfurled in a different way. Grandma Nye's vehicle, with her grandchild within, careened off course, hurtling towards an unsuspecting house. The impact reverberated through the neighborhood, leaving the car lodged halfway into the house's walls, with Grandma Nye practically in the living room at that point. The cause of this calamity was not an external force, or a momentary lapse in attention. It was the force of old age and the onset of dementia that was feasting away on her little brain, impairing her ability to drive safely. In the aftermath, her driver's license was rightfully revoked, a consequence of her diminishing capacity behind the wheel. No one was of course harmed in the car accident, but the same cannot be said about the next part. This next part is going to be less funny and more tragic. I already put in the beginning of this video that there would be mentions of child abuse, and this is where it happens. There's little chapters in the video if you don't want to see actual acts be described. Alright, if child abuse is not something you want to hear about, I suggest skipping this little part of the video, but this segment is essential for the context to the rest of Grandma Nye's story. Her grandson's childhood was riddled with abuse from Grandma Nye. Her most common mode of abuse towards him was to take her cane and strike him with it whenever he would act up. For further context, this grandchild had undiagnosed bipolar disorder, so as one could imagine, he would act up quite a bit, and therefore would reap the consequences of simply being an unwell child. Using the very reason she could walk around without assistance to punish her child for the crime of being a child, it's very disgusting behavior, and she only stopped this cruel method of punishment when he grew old enough to defend himself, while she simultaneously succumbed more to her degrading mind. When she stopped her abuse of him, it was time for the tables to turn, with her grandchild understandably hating her. The first and most cruel story begins on a random day in 2017. Her grandchild, now a teen, was on the phone with his best friend at the time. They were having talks about what they were doing that day, school, and all the stuff that a couple middle school boys would talk about. This interaction, though, ended when thumping could be heard by his friend. There was also the distinct voice of Grandma Nye riddled within this thumping, and a sudden stop. Wanting to know what had just happened, his friend asked what just took place, to which he was met with the response, "I just pushed my grandma down the stairs." Grandma Nye survived this incident, albeit with a couple mild injuries. I think that elder abuse is some bad stuff. Not a huge fan of any abuse as it turns out. But hear me out. I'm not going to justify what his grandson did, but I can't in earnest say that I feel bad for his grandma. Being tormented so much in his formative years and being unmentally checked, well, it was only a matter of time before something like this happened. I don't think that this incident should have happened, but I also don't think it was entirely unearned. Once again, it was pretty bad for him to do that, but it goes to show that abuse in your formative years and your mental health just being neglected never grants good results. There were other incidents of Grandma Nye just being tormented by her grandson. Incidents which are more funny as opposed to the more violent occurrence of her being pushed down the stairs. With the onslaught of dementia, Grandma Nye's vocabulary was shrinking by the day, and there came a point where the only word she would ever say was Nye. Actually spelled N-A-Y, is a way of saying mom in Tagalog. This is why she is known as Grandma Nye, And I say this now because at this point in time we're about to enter, this is where all she knows is the word nigh. A more humorous way she was tormented during the teenage years of her grandson was that of the potato hoodie. When she was out and about, she was always donning the same pink hoodie, the hood never up and always sagging down her back. One day, her grandson and his friend thought it would be funny to just put potatoes inside of her hood until she noticed. They reached quite the large amount of potatoes, since the hood was said by the end of the antics to have sagged so low that the hood reached her waist. And that was just a more banal story. A more funny instance of her torment by the boys starts with her sleeping, as a couple of them tend to do. In the midst of her slumber, the boys sneaked their way into her bedroom, armed with a bottle of Listerine mouthwash. After stealthily making their way over to the bed, they slowly poured the entire bottle all over her feet, covering them in the hygiene product. The bed and sheets were stained with the unmistakable shade of Listerine blue. Following Grandma Nye's nap, when she tried to walk, her feet would stick to the floor with every step, having gotten their enamel cleaned for the entire year. At least with that one, they were probably doing her a favor, since I doubt the feet smelled that great to begin with. What is one of the more infamous stories from the annals of Grandma Nye's torment is that of the vomit door. It all starts in a guest house, which was Grandma Nye's abode when she was too debilitated to live on her own. In the main room of this guest house was a chair she was sitting in when she was met by her grandson and his friend. They were doing something to mess with her, probably just making fun of her when she would reply with "Gagu." For those unaware, Gagu in Tagalog translates to stupid, idiot, fool, dumb, foolish. Repeating this word at them was, a clear sign that she was not having their torment. When the torment would not stop, she resorted to her next best strategy, since she was no longer able to beat them with her cane. She spat at them, and having just eaten, there was more than just saliva propelled at the kids during her defense similar to that of an alpaca. They only found her feeble attempts at detracting them hilarious, mouths agape laughing. One final spit and she managed to do a move that would end the whole confrontation. The wad of saliva and whatever within found their way into the friend's mouth. It was enough to get his friend to stop laughing and attempt to open the door to the house so he could go out and throw up. Alas, the door would not open, and so he vomited all over the door, thus ending the torment, but managing to make quite the mess. Her grandson found this pretty hilarious, but it's still a disgusting thing to think about when putting yourself in his friend's position. The most memorable and arguably the most funny instance of Grandma Nye being tormented was one where she was visited by the Lord and Savior Jesus Christ himself. We open in 2019. We're on vacation with Grandma Nye, her eldest child, her grandson, and of course, her grandson's best friend. One night during this vacation, Grandma Nye was asleep, and that was when the greatest prank of all time was conceived. The two decided to put on the white robes that were in the vacation home, and tried their best to look like angels, and not the biblically accurate ones though, since that probably would have actually given Grandma Nye a heart attack. With that, their plan was a go. They shined their iPhone light into Grandma Nye's face, and kept telling her, Grandma, you are dead," to which all she could reply with was, "Nye." Nye's eldest child seemed not to care, as she was in the same room, looking on her phone, sitting on a chair, just letting it all happen. That only changed when she decided they had gone too far. The boys, knowing they had tricked her into thinking she was dead, decided to let her know where she was going. In their best Transylvanian accent for some reason, they told her, "We are sending you down to hell," and Grandma Nye was not having any of it. She started yelling profanities at what she thought were the angels of heaven, not going down without a fight. At this point, her eldest thought the prank had gone too far, and told the boys to stop messing with Grandma, and so they did. Grandma Nye probably still second-guessing life after this altercation. I can only make this segment so long because it will detail a part that was present throughout Grandma Nye's life, but only requires a few words to gather what happened. For once in this video, we have testimony from Grandma Nye's grandson, giving a drip feed of hints as to what happened between Cocoy and Grandma Nye, who, might I remind you, are son and mother.
Fuck, alright. Sometimes I find my grandma naked with my uncle.
Now, I'm not saying for sure that Cocoy is an incest enjoyer. I would never say that without definitive proof. However, given his tendency to take advantage of his surrounding family, as I laid out in the beginning of this video, it wouldn't surprise me if this had actually happened. I've taken into account that some families are more conservative than others in terms of being naked around each other, but in the same room, at the same time, and not even like in a bathroom where he could just be like bathing her, that's kinda odd behavior. In fact, we have people on record having said that they have walked in on Grandma Nye's eldest child bathing Grandma Nye. And you know what wasn't the case? That Grandma Nye's eldest was also naked at the time. Obviously Grandma Nye would have to be naked because she's being washed. But I don't think the person bathing her needs to be naked too. But I guess Cocoy can just do whatever he wants. The reason I refer to Grandma Nye in the past tense is because she is no longer with us. She left this world in 2022 at the vacation home where the Jesus prank took place, or at the very least in the same city. She is survived by her children, Cocoy and anonymous eldest child, and also her grandson. When Grandma Nye passed away, there was a refusal to do an autopsy because she was so old and the dementia was really eating at her. As it turns out though, the only person present at the time of her demise was Cocoy, and it was in a secluded spot hours away from anyone else. This is where the theory comes in. In the beginning of this video, I mentioned behind the guise of frugal living was actually a decent sum of money to Grandma Nye's name. There's no conspiracy theory, that's actually a pretty well-observed idea. Given she had money to her name and Cocoy is a known shady character whose transience and dependence on others knows no bounds, it's a conspiracy theory that maybe he was behind the death of Grandma Nye. It is said that he intentionally brought her out to the vacation home, where no one would see, and by means known to the ungeneral public, put her down so that he could get the money that he hoped she had had so much of. Her death resulted ultimately in life being easier for her family, but also the money being handed down to both of her children equally, much to the dismay of those who were not Cocoy. With irresponsibility like that of Cocoy, it's no wonder the rest of the family was not keen on him getting half of the money. The money went quickly for him because, of course it did, and if he was the reason for her expected yet untimely demise, then it was all for nothing. And so with her being dead, where do you think she ended up going? Heaven or hell? I mean, she gave her opinion on it in this one clip.
When you die, are you gonna go to heaven or hell?
Hey.
So what do you think of this entire situation? Do you think Grandma Nye was too harsh to her grandson? Do you think her grandson went too far in his treatment of his grandma in his teenage years? Hell, do you think that Cocoy is actually the reason that Grandma Nye met her fate in that vacation home in 2022? For what is such an interesting story, packed full of twists and turns, I'm surprised no one has covered this topic. I guess I'll be the first to discuss Grandma Nye, the most depraved story you've never heard.